You are tuning in to the Atlanta Realtors Rundown, the official podcast for the Atlanta Realtors. We're here to keep you updated with the latest trends, topics, and keep you in the know of our ever-changing Atlanta market. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Atlanta Realtor Rundown. I'm your host today, Matt LaMarsh. Thank you so much for being here and for subscribing and leaving us a review. We really, really appreciate that. Hopefully, you're finding some value in the podcast episodes here and with our guests that we have here every other week. So thank you again for being here. We really appreciate it. Today, I'm really excited. I actually mentioned this before the show as we were going back and forth. I would probably not be sitting in the studio, much less in the Atlanta Realtors Association in any capacity, not for the man that sits before me today, a patriarch in Atlanta real estate.
I didn't know I was that old.
Well, that's like a sign of, or that's a thing of respect. Is that not? That's a good thing, I think.
I'm old. Okay.
His words, not mine. A patriarch, I think, maybe we need to define this. But anyway, Scott Askew, thank you so much for being here for today to record this episode with us, but to share your vast, mature knowledge, we'll just say. Mature is better than old, I think, for everything Atlanta real estate, but also to give us some history, as well as what I think, based on the offline conversations that we've had, very powerful for new agents, for veteran agents, for people that are maybe looking to shake things up a little bit. You've seen a lot of change in Atlanta, and you've seen a lot of change in Atlanta real estate. So without further ado, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Matt.
Of course.
I'll try to be as nice and answer questions as best I can.
Well, we're happy to have you here. So let's start with the beginning. How did Scott get into real estate?
Well, first off, my father was a broker, and I did a lot of different kind of jobs growing up. I laid sewer lines with Reedsville prison inmates out on their early work release program Lester Maddox had. I bartended at the Brandy House. A lot of people, well, they'd have to be closer to my age to know where the Brandy House was. I built homes with the Sims brothers in the Vinings and Smyrna area in high school and my first summer after my freshman year in college. And so it was Christmas break my senior year in college. I came home, I'm having lunch with my mom and dad, and my father looks at me and says, well, son, pretty soon you're going to be getting out of school. Do you have an idea what you're going to do? And I looked at him and I said, I decided to go into real estate. And he says, no. And I was like, what? And he says, no. I said, well, no, what? And he said, no. And I said, what? He says, you'll never make it. And I was like, oh, love you too, Dad.
Thanks for the encouragement.
Yeah. I mean, I am introverted, and a lot of people don't know that unless they know me, because in real estate, I can turn on a different switch, but I prefer to be pretty much on my own and do my own thing. My dad, of course, knew that, and so he was like, no. So after a while, he said, okay, tell you what, you tell me why you think you can do this real estate business. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I built houses, and so I really enjoyed taking just a raw piece of dirt and seeing a structure, being erected on it. And then bartending, I think I improved a little bit on how to talk to people that I didn't necessarily know. And so I think this would be a good thing for me to do. And he just looked at me and kind of shook his head and said, all right, well, okay, but as soon as you take your last exam, you're going to have to get started. I said, yes, sir. Now, my dad was 42 when I was born. My mother was 40 when I was born. And back in the 50s, that was an oddity. So they were kind of like my friend's grandparents. Mm-hmm. And you didn't mess with them. It's just, and I was like, yes, sir. And so sure enough, 6 days after my last final exam at Georgia, I'm in real estate school. Mm-hmm. And off we go. So that's how I got started. Real estate's changed a lot. No, it hasn't. The technology is really the only thing that's changed.
Right.
Everything else is all about people skills. And I think some people try to get so much into the electronic world that they lose that personal touch.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I think that many of us need to take a better look at.
I love that. Well, and that's the perfect kind of title of today's, taking the old and making it new again. Because to me, the technology is great. I love social media. I love every new, widget and gadget that comes out. But at the same time, the shiny stuff kind of distracts sometimes from the business, the core business, and how you can become successful in this business. Doesn't require all that. Certainly helps, certainly, accelerates the learning curve, but doesn't necessarily, sustain the business. There's some tried and true things that, regardless of when you came through Atlanta real estate, still work. So talk to us a little bit about your progression. Obviously, you started out in sales as an individual agent, I assume.
Okay. Yeah.
Gotcha. And did they have teams? Did they have groups of people that were working together?
Well, if I was going to go out of town, I'd pick somebody in my office who might be in town when I'm out of town, and I'd say, "Hey, cover for me." And that was team.
Gotcha. Different than it is today, though, right?
Yeah.
And I know there's a lot of different models, business models as well as team models, and brokerage. There's to me, there's more variety than there probably ever has been. Would you agree? Or
I think so. The Real Estate Commission is looking at teams, and they proposed some changes for teams, and then the state legislature said, "No, we're not ready to make a change." So that was taken off the board about 6 months ago. But everybody has their own way of doing business,
Sure.
and that's fine. But just do it, in a legal manner and
ethically and everything else.
and take care of the client and forget about yourself. And if you do that, you'll be surprised how successful you can be in this business.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit about your progression within, going from salesperson to broker to, where you are today, but also talk to us about how things have changed. Like, is there anything that's, again, still true that, again, the fundamentals that we talk about, how to get business and how to lead generate? I mean, you and I have talked quite a bit about this, about particular scenarios and stuff, but have you seen anything that just isn't true anymore in real estate that used to be?
No. Well, there was one technique that was actually, it was very commonplace. If I were writing up an offer on your listing, I would call you up and say, "Matt, I've got an offer for your listing." And you said, "Okay, let me call you back." And you would call your owner and find out when was a convenient time for me to come. And the two of us, I would present the offer to your seller. And we don't do that. Hardly ever do I hear of that. The only time I hear of it is I always suggest to our folks, if we have multiple offers come in on a listing, then offer to allow people to personally deliver and introduce the seller to this buyer and their offer. If you do that, one, the agents that are trying to co-op with you are going to trust you more. Because right now, as well as I do, there are a lot of times we would call a listing agent and say, writing up an offer for you. And they would say something like, "Oh, well, I've got multiple offers." I might call BS on that.
Right.
But how do you do that?
Sure.
And I can get back into that later. But by telling people, "Hey, come on by," you'll find people, the buyer agents will say, "Oh, no, that's okay. You go right ahead." They don't want to put the effort out, but they now know that you're not messing with them.
Right.
Being honest with them. And so that's a little thing that I think we did in the olden days. We're really not doing it now, but I think we should revisit that and consider that as a possible way to make more friends in the real estate industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and we've talked a lot about this too, not just here at the Atlanta Realtors, but within other brokers and stuff. There is this sense of collaboration that, if you really break it down, we're all trying to get to the same place.
Right.
With our buyers and with our sellers. We're ultimately trying to sell their house. We're ultimately helping them find a house that fits every single one of their needs, checks every single box, if that even exists. Did homes used to exist that checked everybody's box, by the way? Not so much.
Maybe. It was more common that maybe you checked all the right boxes for one party, but if there was two parties involved in the buying decision,
That makes sense.
a lot of times the second party was felt a little shortchanged.
Sure. Got it. So, because I feel like it's gotten more complicated to try to check more of those boxes. But anyway, I digress. So yeah, you're right. I love the idea though of, and I think this is something that we should bring back. Because I think you're right. I think that spirit of collaboration, I think that face-to-face, like outside of the closing table and outside of maybe a showing where a listing agent is present, like when do we see each other? I mean, outside of events and stuff,
Right.
But if you're with a brokerage and I'm with another brokerage, we may never meet face-to-face and we can still do a deal together.
Absolutely.
Which I think is one of the opportunities that we maybe we need to bring that back. We'd love to hear from you guys down in the comments here. Should we bring this back? Because I like this idea. Talk to us a little bit about how you built your business. So what did you do for lead generation? How did you differentiate yourself? Obviously I got to believe there weren't quite as many realtors. You guys didn't have 16,000 realtors.
Yeah.
Close to?
No. A good thing that you just brought that up, but it's on the side table. According to the Georgia Real Estate Commission, as of October 31st, we have a little over 4,700 more agents than we did October of last year.
1 year ago, yeah.
Yeah, 1 year ago. So the competition is, building up, but since we are in a slowing period, it looks like we're going to probably lose that 4,700, I would think. But how I got started, I got very, very lucky. Chris, again, back in the olden days, you would pass your class to then give you the opportunity to take the state exam. You pass the state exam, but everything was done by mail. And so you knew once you heard that you had passed, you had to mail your diploma per se to the Real Estate Commission, and the Real Estate Commission would mail you back your license. Well, that'd take 2-3 weeks.
Right.
And so what I did when I knew I passed and sent the information over to the Real Estate Commission, I started writing notes to people that I knew, my friends from high school who had actually gotten a job, and then a lot to their parents. A lot of the young people forget the parents will really help them. Yeah. Because you're a friend of their child, and they want you to be a success as well as anybody. So anyway, I did that, wrote some notes, made some phone calls, and my license came in on a Saturday. My father actually called me and said, "Son, your license came in the mail." I said, "I guess I'll start Monday." And he says, "Well, whatever." So, okay. And so walked into the office. He said, "All right, here's your desk." And he put me in between two chain smokers.
Inside,
yeah. And I don't smoke. And so he was not trying to help me. He wanted to shoo me out the door and go find something else to do.
This was a test. This was just like a giant test.
Oh, God, yeah. So anyway, got in there, and about 45 minutes later, the receptionist calls out, "Scott, you've got a call on line 1." And I'm going, "What?
Does anyone know I'm here?"
Yeah. I said, "My mom knows I'm here. Is she calling me? What's going on?" And so I picked up the phone, and it was my best friend from high school. And he had gone to a different college, but, we were back in Atlanta. And he calls me and says, "Skew's my nickname from high school." He says, "Skew, met a guy at a party this past weekend, and he said he wanted to buy a house. I got his name and number for you."
Wow.
Because part of the thing that we don't do as agents when we're first starting out, we'll have friends that will say, "Well, give me some business cards. I'll hand them out for you." Well, that's all fine. That's not going to really help you, though, because the recipient of your card is going to put it in the trash can.
Right.
And so you've got to train your, I call them bird dogs. You got to train your bird dogs to find the clients, but then call you and tell you who they gave your business card to and how to reach them.
For sure.
Because you're motivated to call these folks. And so anyway, he gave me name and phone number. Jim O'Donnell was the young man who was buying his first home. And I worked up, and that was about 9:30 in the morning. So at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I finally worked up the courage to call. I didn't know what to do because there was no post licensing back then.
Right.
Okay. It was, here's a desk, here's a phone, good luck, you're on your own. And so I called him up, and I said, I was referred to. He says, yeah, I want to buy a house. And I said, okay. He says, well, can we look over the weekend? And I said, well, I could get with you about 1 o'clock on Sunday. And he said, sure, great. And I said, okay, well, what are you looking for? I knew enough to ask that question.
That's good.
And so that got me started. Well, 3 days later, on the following Thursday from that Monday, I get another phone call. It was a guy by the name of Charlie Bradford calling, and I had no idea who this guy was. And he could tell by my voice I have no idea. And so he says, yeah, well, that's commonplace. But
right.
Anyway, he said, you went to school with my sister, Sissy. And I went, yeah. And he said, and you wrote our mother a note that you were in real estate. And I went, yeah. And he says, well, my step-grandmother-in-law. Now, follow that one on the family tree, okay?
Okay, got it.
The step-grandmother-in-law was going to be put into a nursing home, and they wanted to sell this house at the corner of Peachtree, Dunwoody Road, and Lardon Circle. And I said, okay. And he said, can we meet you tomorrow? And I was like,
At 1 o'clock.
okay. And so what do? I go back to my dad now. I go, hey, Dad, this is happening. What do I do? And he just looked at me and says, I'll go with you. Okay. And so we go out there and get back in the car after about an hour and a half of talking to people. I had a new listing.
Excellent.
Hey, baby.
Man, 4 days in. That's going to be a record.
Sweet. That house sold in 2 weeks. The following Sunday, 2 days later, on Sunday, I pick up Jim O'Donnell, the third house I showed him. He says, I like this home. I went, great. And I kept on driving. And we got to about the 7th or 8th house. He says, I like that house back there. I went, okay. And he said, all right, let's make an offer. I said, okay. And so I'm driving back to the office, and I don't even know what a contract looks like. And I'm like, oh, crap. This is not going to be good. But what happens? I see my father had driven to the office. He apparently had just this feeling that, this dumb kid is probably going to need some help. And drove up, wrote a contract. I presented the contract. We negotiated that night. So I had 2 deals in my first 2 weeks of real estate. Now, I thought I was God's gift to real estate. Yep. And so I went out and bought a bunch of new suits. And then I went and bought a new car on a 90-day note. And my dad's going, son, slow down. I said, stay out of my way, old man.
Do you know who you're
natural.
talking? Yeah, do you know who you're talking to here? I just closed 2 deals my first week in real estate. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, 3 months later, I got about a week to go before that note's due. Hadn't done anything.
Oh, boy.
So I go back to my dad, and I said, Dad, how do you sell real estate? And he says, well, have you ever sold anything? I said, yeah, remember I had those 2 deals right off the bat? He goes, yeah, vaguely I remember that. How'd you get that? And I said, well, I wrote a bunch of notes, made a couple phone calls, got a couple of leads. He goes, have you called anybody since? I said, well, everybody knows I'm in real estate. And he just looked at me and says, have you called anybody else? I went, everybody knows. Have you called anyone else?
Right.
Yes, sir. And I left because I knew what I had to do. And I got on the phone, and I ended up doing pretty well that first year. And then followed that up with really good years. And I was very fortunate. I'm a native of Atlanta, so know a lot of people. Went to public schools until 9th grade, and then 9th grade transferred to a private school. Then went to University of Georgia. So, when I met my soon-to-be wife, and we were having dinner one night before we were ever engaged, and she looked at me and she goes, I don't really like going out with you. I was like, well, forget about that one. Next. And she goes, no, that's not what I'm talking about. She says, but we have no privacy. Everywhere we go, somebody. Mm-hmm. And of course I said, well, look at the bright side. If I mess around on you, I'll get caught.
Everyone will know.
And she goes, good. Yeah, it's a good thought. So
let's move forward.
Yeah, let's go. All right, here we go. But anyway, it's all about, you don't want to be a secret agent.
Right.
And you've got to be out there. You got to, be visible. Mm-hmm. And I took that concept to a thing that, a lot of people call farming, farming a neighborhood. Well, back in those days, again, there's no electronic submissions through Facebook. So there's all that. We didn't even have fax machines until I've been in business about 2 years, and no computers until I was in business about 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we're in the dark ages. But I would create a newsletter for a neighborhood and hand deliver it. Mm-hmm. I'd knock on the door on a Saturday and a Sunday, and if they weren't there, I would leave the newsletter on the outside of their mailbox, between the flag and the mailbox itself. And the newsletter was about the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Now, I had different sections in it. I had helpful hints from Heloise, recipe of the month. Do you need to find out what your house is worth? Are you moving to another city? I can refer you. I had different sections in it. And then the last section was neighborhood news. And so I would hand deliver this, and I would be in a suit. And the first newsletter I did was in July.
In Atlanta.
And I'm in a 3-piece suit, walking the streets, handing out newsletters.
Guaranteed to be over 100 degrees, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you get up, it's 7:30, 8 o'clock, it's already, 95.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I'm getting the visual there.
It was ugly, but it worked because I would be ringing doorbells, and people would come looking at me and go, oh, my God, let me give you some water. And I didn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
But I would just say, here's your Lardon's newsletter, and I'd walk away. They would have to, call out to me if they want to have a conversation, because I wanted them to open the door the following month.
Right.
All right. And I would take over a neighborhood in a matter of 5 to 6 months because they saw me. I was visible. And when we got into the mid 80s to late 80s, you could get, pay a company to send out postcards and, generic newsletters. I was spanking them because it was personal.
Yeah.
It was about this neighborhood, and you know who I am.
Right.
So farming, I think, is something that a lot of agents don't do anymore. And I think that's a great way to get started. Pick an area that you like. Yeah. Don't just pick one because it's there.
Well, I love that. And especially in today's age where there's so much technology that we can leverage for the real estate business. And most people do, I think, a pretty good job of it, like your CRMs and your email newsletters and your mailers and, but to your point, a lot really hasn't changed as it relates to that. And that tried and true method of constantly being in front of people, I think really, really works. So not much has really changed in that part. It's just how we go about doing it. But to your point, I have found that even with social media and the technology that we have, when you deeply personalize it, when I shoot a video that says, hey, Scott, it's Matt, it's Friday, I'm really excited about the weekend, here's what we're doing, what are you up to? Now you're like, he took 30 seconds out of his day to send me a personalized video. And to me, that's the same thing as going to their door. Not
that's
exactly
why you're
the same,
successful.
Right? Well, I appreciate that. But I love these types of stories because I think that, again, a lot of this old stuff can become new stuff again, and really not much has changed. But people want, our consumers, our clients want that personalized service, touch, and feel, if you will, from They're real estate professional.
And there are lots of ways that you can farm too. 'Cause,
Right.
like next time you go to your doctor, your dentist, you meet with your financial advisor, ask them who is their business manager, and try to get an introduction to that person, because that business manager is probably helping multiple doctor groups, whatever, and they're trying to diversify their portfolio. And you talk to them about, well, I can help you find the real estate.
Right.
And that's a huge market. I did some of that and made buku buck.
Yeah.
All right. So I think some people are too shy to think that anyone would do business with them that's in that capacity.
Right.
That's my guess.
Yeah.
And then I learned from my best friend from high school, David McWilliams, who passed away about a year ago now. But he started with Merrill Lynch. And so I always hung around him, but I started getting to know all the people in his office. And my second year, 8 of his cohorts bought a home. And I sold 5 of them.
That? Did he invite you in? Did you just
No,
pop by one day?
honestly, he didn't. Yeah, I just popped by.
I love that.
Back in the day, closings were always going to be downtown because attorneys didn't have outside perimeter. Right. They didn't know where that was. And so I would always try to schedule my closings around lunchtime, and either before or after a closing, I would go down to Peachtree and Marietta Street, where Merrill Lynch is on the 16th floor, I believe it was. And I'd walk past the receptionist and walk into the bullpen.
Yeah.
Because, he's brand new getting started. David, his parents never owned a home. He bought his parents their first home.
Wow.
He was extremely successful. Went on to be one of the 6 district managers for Merrill Lynch. Yeah.
Nice.
He was very successful. He was 6'5". The only way he got to go to college is basketball.
Okay.
And so I would walk into the bullpen and I'd see a head sticking out amongst the crowd and go, all right, that must be him. And he, being a gentleman, I would walk up and, his buddies who were doing the same thing, they were dialing for dollars. They'd be looking up like, is this going to be another guy that was going to be calling people like us? And he would introduce me. So then I would call him back later and say, all right, now who did you introduce me to?
Right.
And I'd write him a note.
Yeah.
Hey, great meeting you.
Well, and you know where they work, so you got the dress, the address to go with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so all I had to do is go back, and then if David was on the phone when I walked in, I'd go see Casey Claflin or Bill Elliott or all these different guys that I end up selling houses for and becoming buddies with.
Yeah.
But here's another thing. When you get into the financial world, they have athletic leagues just for those type of companies. Well, I couldn't play in a game with them, but I practiced basketball and softball with them.
Oh, okay.
So I got to know all these guys, and I was just one of the guys. They would have a party, and it'd be all Merrill Lynch and Skew.
Scott.
Yeah.
I love it.
And so that was farming, and I made a lot of money.
Yeah.
Bill Elliott called me one day. He says, I need you to call one of my clients. I went, okay. And he says, her name is Mrs. Dwiggins. Mrs. Dwiggins has passed away. She was a sweet, sweet lady. I called her up, arranged to go meet her, get in my car, and I was going to meet her at her home. I'm driving, and this is in the mid to late 80s. And I'm on Lower Roswell Road heading toward the city of Roswell. And brand new subdivisions being built on either side. And then there's all these woods over here, and then the subdivision starts back again. I go, wait a minute, I missed the house.
It was the land?
She was sitting on 63 acres.
Holy moly.
Yeah, baby.
Woo.
Okay.
In Marietta.
In Marietta.
Nice.
Yes, sir. And so, we developed a friendship. She made party favors for a Christmas party I was having for the office one year, all this other. I did not sell that property, though.
Huh.
And this is a good thing for people, if they're going to listen to this, they might consider. You have all of these contact management possibilities.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. if you're going to use them, use them. Mm-hmm. Back then, of course, we didn't have that. I used a shoebox with index cards. And so I would meet somebody. I was scheduled to meet someone 4 times a year. So every 3 months, I was going to, hopefully be able to meet them face to face, but at least call and talk to them. Well, I had Ms. Dwiggins in my, slot to call, and for whatever reason, I cannot tell you why, I did not call her. About 2 weeks later, I found her index card in my briefcase, and I called her. And I said, Ms. Dwiggins, Scott Askew, how you doing? She goes, I'm doing great, Scott. She says, but you're not going to like me. I knew exactly what she'd done. Now, this was after having written 3 offers for people who wanted to buy her property.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And each time she would find a reason to not sell because she was in her 90s at that point, and she was a little nervous.
Sure.
And so I had gotten a guy with Arthur Anderson, Paul Dimick, to figure out a way to make it less taxable income. And so she had all these kids and then grandkids and great-grandkids, so we were going to deed, all these people little pieces and to figure it out. And we planned all this stuff for her. Well, here's the thing, and everybody needs to remember this. If you own your home, you're going to get a letter from the governmental entity of your county. It says, here's the new valuation of your home. You need to know when that happens. And the day after, you need to start calling people that you've been speaking with about helping them buy or sell pieces of real estate. That's a good time. Because that's exactly was the timing on this one. And she says, I sold the property. I went, well, Mr. Wiggins, I'm happy for you. You needed to do this. And I says, well, why didn't you call me?
Yeah.
And she says, well, Scott, a couple of days ago, I got my assessment. The next day, I had an unsolicited offer. And see, all these other unsolicited offers she was getting, she would call me and say, you need to come by and look at this and tell me, what should I do? Well, she said, I was so mad about my assessment, I just signed the damn thing. Oh, gosh. Her words exactly. Oh. And I was like, okay. That cost me over $850,000 of a commission. $850,000. That was back in the mid to late 80s. Okay, so moving on. You got to, that's the way it is. Now, I learned, and that was from, again, the Merrill Lynch group.
Yeah.
And then I'll give one more Merrill Lynch thing. Dave McWilliams, as I told you, was very successful. We would always meet at Chi-Chi's on Roswell Road on Thursdays and start the weekend.
Yeah.
And we were both successful. So I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I called to talk to him, and I think I was going to be late, or maybe I was going to be early. I don't know what it was. And Janet, his assistant, answered the phone, and she says, hey, Scott. And I said, Janet, we talked to Mac. And she says, he's not in. I said, oh, okay. When will he be back? And she goes, he doesn't come in on Thursdays. I was like, what? She goes, yeah, he doesn't come in on Thursdays. I went, oh, God. No, because we were kind of competing with each other as to who was doing better in our industry on a friendly basis. You got to have something to motivate you sometimes.
I get it.
And I finally met up with him at Chi-Chi's. Looked at him and I said, how'd your day go? He says, had a good day. I said, doing what? He said, well, I was working, calling on people. I went, you're not telling me the truth, Bubba.
You were in the office?
I talked to Janet.
I talked to her,
and she says, you don't come into the office, so what? You were busy doing your laundry, grocery shopping? And he says, no, this is what I do on Thursdays. He said, I drive to an office building I've never been in. I take the elevator around 8:30 in the morning. I take the elevator to the top floor, and I go and I start going door to door, and I ask to see the owner of the business or the manager. Okay, and so I'll do the top floor, and then I'll walk down the steps,
next floor,
and work down. Work my way down. I will end up, going back to my apartment, calling Janet and say, I need a C letter for these people, a B letter for these people, and an A letter for these people. The C letter was, sorry I missed you. I'd love the opportunity to meet, and this is who I am. That was that. A B letter was to someone who he met with who would give him some outrageous return on investment ideas. That these are the minimum. I mean, I want a 30% ROI, or I don't want to mess with it at all.
Yeah.
And so he would have a letter that said effectively, sorry, we don't have products like that right now, but if I come across some, I'll get in touch with you. And then the A letter was somebody who gave him reasonable expectations, and you say, I've got some good ideas for you. I'd like to make an appointment.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, and this was the bad side of me because I thought I was doing, real well. And I said, Mac, that's grunt work. Why are you doing grunt work? We don't need to do that kind of work. And he says, Skew, how much do you have to invest with me to get started if you're going to work with me? I said $100,000, and that was a lot of money.
Still,
and we were 26 years old, 26 back in the 80s.
Yeah.
That was a lot of money. But he was that good that he could command that.
Sure.
And so I said, $100,000. He said, yep. I said, how much do you think I will make off of each client? I went, I've got no clue. He said, I'll make somewhere between $45,000 and $65,000 a year off of each client. So I said, all right, well, now how many people, after you've gone through this exercise, how many people will be a client of yours? He said, one or two. So, so in effect, he was making $70,000 to $90,000 on that day. He wasn't going to get it on that day.
Right.
But he was, getting ready to bank it.
Yeah.
And so
just for one day's worth of work too.
That's right.
When you, yeah.
And so what do? I'm going to mimic him.
Okay.
He's successful.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be original in this business to make buku buck.
Correct.
All right.
Well, and nothing is really truly original. It's all been done before, maybe differently, in a different way, with a different tone, but everything is the same.
Yeah. So anyway, what I started doing is, and it was back in those days, there was a company called Scientific Atlanta. Now, Scientific Atlanta closed in the 90s. No, they just closed in 2004. I think it's fairly recently.
Like Peachtree Corners.
Yeah, in Peachtree Corners.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were a technology company which was new for Atlanta. And so anyway, they were out in Peachtree Corners, and I wanted to start calling on businesses. I decided, instead of a high rise, I would start calling on selected businesses. And I wasn't going to call on people who, like Bell South, AT&T, Delta Airlines, anything like that, because they were going to have their real estate division or their, go-to brokers already.
Right.
So what I did is I picked up this, at the time, fairly new newspaper called the Atlanta Business Chronicle. Very good newspaper.
Yeah.
And toward the back, it would have a section on businesses that were applying for business licenses, alcohol licenses, all sorts of stuff. So I'm looking for people who are, my office was in Dunwoody at the time, so I was adjacent to Peachtree Corners. And so I was looking for small companies that were just starting out, and I would go and walk, just cold turkey, walk into these offices. And I would say, hello, I'm Scott Askew, at the time with Askew Realty Company, which I closed that down.
Yeah.
But, and they, and I said, I'd like to see the owner or the manager. And when I got to see them, I would say, I'd like to be your real estate agent. And they'd look at me and they go, well, I've already leased this space and I've already bought a home. So, son, you're a little late.
Yeah, right.
And I said, well, no, that's not actually what I was talking about. And then they go, well, what exactly are you talking about? And I said, all right, well, let me ask you a question. Are you trying to grow this company? Well, I knew the answer. I mean, every
Technology.
owner wants to build
Still
their
today.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So they go, well, yeah. And I go, okay, great. Now, do you find that most of your talent comes from the Atlanta metropolitan area, or are you having to go outside the metropolitan area to find talent? And back then, technology wasn't anything in Atlanta.
Right.
And so
no Atlanta Tech Village or anything like that.
No.
IBM was coming eventually, right?
Yeah. I used to do a lot of business with IBM though. I got to meet the trainer for the Atlanta area IBM, and he knew who was coming in and who was and he kept feeding me.
I love it.
Oh, I loved it too. But anyway, what was I talking about?
So you would ask them where they were coming from?
I would say, so what do? You send out requests for submittal of your resumes, and he goes, yeah. And you get, hundreds of them? He says, well, it depends, but yeah, we get a lot.
Yeah.
And I said, so you would go through all those resumes and then narrow it down to 25, 30, and then you would start calling, talking to them on the phone. He goes, yeah, you're
it's like you've done
running
this
pretty
before.
good, yeah. And he said, and then I said, so then you would narrow it down to 2 to 5 people that you would actually fly into Atlanta to interview? And he goes, yeah. And I just looked at him and I said, so who picks him up at the airport? And he just would look at me with, stunned look. And then usually he would then point to somebody out and, outside of his office, like a secretary or somebody, and I said, all right, here's what I want to do. I want to become your mini chamber of commerce. You give me 2 to 3 weeks notice on who you got coming in. I will contact them. I'll ask them if they were to accept a job offer that they may or may not get.
Right.
What kind of home would they be looking for? And how far are they willing to drive from the office to that dwelling? And then what I will do is I will send them some information on available homes, and then I'll arrange to pick them up at the airport. I'll show them some of the iconic buildings throughout Atlanta. Then I'll take them and show them 2 or 3 homes that meet their what they were looking for, and then I'll bring them to your office. And I almost batted 1,000 on this one.
Wow.
And the owners will look at me and say, what would you charge me? And I said, well, if you just reimburse me for the cost of lunch.
Oh.
Sold. Now, what that then did is that set me up with that company because, when I'm calling these people, they know the name of the owner that they have an interview with in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
And I'm saying, Bill told me to call you. Well, they're going to listen to me.
Correct.
Because I'm connected to the boss man.
Yeah.
And so I did a lot of business that way. And of those 2 or 3 that may come in to be interviewed and then only one gets a job, I know I'm going to get that person to buy a home.
Right.
Well, the other 2 are going to be new bird dogs for me out in Phoenix or Dallas or Minneapolis or wherever they are. Mm-hmm. And they're going to run into friends who maybe are getting a transfer to Atlanta or whatever, and they say, yeah, I met a real estate guy, and he was kind of nutty, but, he knew something about real estate, so here's his name and number, and, So I had bird dogs working for me all over the country.
I love it.
And we can do that. I don't know if anybody in my office is doing that.
Interesting.
If they are, they're being very quiet about it, not telling me about it. But there's lots of ways in today's environment, even though you have all this technology, to get personal. Mm-hmm. Go shake hands.
Right.
And those people that are comfortable doing that typically seem to make a lot of money and have a lot of success.
Well, it's such a soft intro too, because I do a little bit of that where I go to past clients' offices, and a lot of my clients are small business owners, so they own their own insurance agency or they got their own financial group that they work with it. And I go and I take them lunch, or I'll take them a sweet treat on a Friday afternoon or whatever, because to me that soft intro, like me pretty well, I'm not a hard sales guy. I'm not calling you, hey, who do you know looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate today? Like, I'm just not that guy, right? But I love the soft landing too. And you're right, as long as you're there, other people in an office, especially a small office of 5 to 10 people. 50's great, 100's phenomenal, but you're not going to meet all those people. But, the 5 to 10 I love because you're immediately getting introductions. And I'm now, even from year one, and I've only been in the business for 4 years, but from year one, someone introduced me at their office. I'm still talking to them about buying real estate. They have not bought anything, but I know when they will call me. So I love that. I love that so much.
Again, that's another reason why you're successful.
Well, I appreciate it.
Now, I got one other source of business that a lot of people don't think about. CRB, CRS courses. But don't take the courses in Atlanta.
Okay.
Go outside of Atlanta.
Okay.
That's what I did. I didn't, none
For
of those
that
classes.
don't know those acronyms.
Certified real estate broker, and then certified residential specialist.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, had to think about it. I got those things back in the late 80s. I mean, I jumped all over the education. I had to. I was young. I was, 22 when I got started. I looked like I was 16. I grew a mustache to try to look a little older. And, I knew better than to try to fake it. I would tell people I'm new in the business.
Yeah.
But then they'd see on my card and they said, what's a CRS? I said, I'm a certified residential specialist. I took these courses that I don't have to take, but I took them so I could do a better job for you.
Yeah.
Credibility, right?
100%.
So it helps.
Yeah.
But I would always go outside of Atlanta because at the time that I was taking them, the courses were like $500 for a 2.5-day course. And then, I'd have to fly out and pay for hotel.
And,
So I'm spending, $1,000 to go take a class. I'm meeting other people who are spending money, who are willing to really up their game.
Yep.
And sure enough, after, I think it was CRS. No, it may have been CRB, but it doesn't matter. I get a phone call from a girl, and she said, I'm so-and-so. Do you remember me? I'm like, got no clue.
Yeah.
And then she told me why I should remember her. I went, okay, now I remember who you are. And she said, my husband and an investment group are looking for a hotel site in Atlanta. Can you help them with that? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I'd never done that before, but I can learn quick.
That's right.
And
That's right.
sold them a site. And my wife and I went to Africa for a 2-week photographic safari after the closing.
Wow.
So, surround yourself. We always talk about surrounding ourselves with successful people. And we always think about, well, that's the people that are in our community.
Right.
Get to know the good brokers out and about. So they'll refer you. I mean, you just got a referral that I signed off on yesterday.
Right.
And they're not in Atlanta.
Right.
You do a good job of contacting people in all these different cities that are connecting to Atlanta because Atlanta's a great hub.
Right.
If you do those things, you're going to make it in this business.
Yeah.
You're not going to be part of the 88% that get out of the business within 5 years of obtaining their real estate license.
I appreciate the compliment and the nice words, but I think you're right. I think that's, you said grunt work, and I call it the grit. Like there's this thing deep inside of some of us that we think about things differently, that we want to try things differently. And honestly, some of them are easier to do, but they seem more difficult.
Yeah.
And when you first go out and do them, you're like, this feels weird, because I love getting comfortable and being uncomfortable. There's something really powerful about that. And that's why I wanted to have you on, is because a lot of the stuff that you've done and the stories that you've told today, I think really accentuate the fact that there's a ton of different ways you can go about being successful in this business. But you do have to be willing to try some new stuff every once in a while. And I love your final point there, because that's one thing that I really focused on the last year, was getting outside of not just the brokerage, but the model itself, other brands, other resources, other education, and connecting with people that were like me. Because to me, if I'm going to send you a referral, I want to trust that you know what you're doing and that you're good at what you do, and you do it at a very high level, because even if someone just comes across a social media post and says, you know, we are thinking about making a move to Florida and we're leaving Georgia. We're going to use Matt on this side, but we need someone down there. Awesome. Where? I've got the guy. I've got the girl. Because there's a lot. I mean, you mentioned it. And really in the last 2.5 years, we've seen a lot more of this, that this interstate traffic, right, has really increased. So I love that so much. Anything else that you'd like to share or close us out with today?
Go Dogs.
Oh, I hope Bill Rawlings is listening to this. I really, really hope he's listening to this. No, I really appreciate your time, Scott. Thank you so much for sharing the stories and all the insight today. It was really helpful, and I hope and I know people got a ton of value out of this. So thank you again for your time today.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, and you've done a great job getting some very talented people to share their thoughts.
Well, we're surrounded by a ton of talented people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
We're very, very blessed in this community to have people that have done this for a long time, done this for a short time, had tons of success, and built incredible businesses as a result of it. So thank you for that. But thank you for listening today. If you have not yet subscribed or left a review, go ahead and write us a review. Hit the 5 stars there. We'd love to have you share which episode you came from, what topic you enjoyed the most, any and every bit of information you want to share with us. We'd love to have some input. And we thank you for listening to the Atlanta Realtors Rundown.
Thank you for tuning in to the Atlanta Realtors Rundown. Please subscribe, and for more information on how to get engaged, check us out at atlantarealtors.com. We look forward to having you join us for the next episode.